But much like when Andy was in Philly, how much does the offensive coordinator do? Soren Petro, 8:10 a.m. in Kansas City, with a look at Doug Pederson, the candidate, and the Kansas City Chiefs. Soren, welcome aboard. How are you?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
You got it. We wonder, in Kansas City, with you guys still in the playoffs out there, is Pederson being a candidate for the Eagles job, is that even a big story?
You know, not really, and I'll tell you because I'm sure, as you just kind of mentioned, and the whole Eagle fan base knows, you don't really know what the offensive coordinator under Andy Reid does. We know he's part of building the game plan. We know this year, and it was kind of information that came out about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Andy Reid started putting it out there, that about maybe 20% of the plays are now being called by Doug Pederson, that if he thinks he's in a funk, I think was how he put it, he'd turn it over to Doug Pederson, or there were just times that there was something else he wanted to go handle. He felt comfortable at any time saying, Doug, the plays are yours, and he would go do whatever it was he felt he needed to do, whether that was, talk up the defense, talk to the other side, coaching-wise, clock management. So we know that he is, at least according to Andy Reid, sometimes calling the plays. But, unless you've been on the staff and in those closed-door meetings, how much he really does, you got to wonder. And also Brad Childress is on the staff, kind of cloak and dagger behind the scenes as I think he's the
passing game coordinator.
Yeah, and I don't know. We said special projects and hall monitor and lunchroom keeper, whatever. So he's in that mix as well. I mean, I think it's clear that the league believes Doug Pederson actually does have a lot to do with the game planning. He certainly carries himself very well on the 15-minute window the NFL makes the teams put the coordinators in front of the media. I think he always does a nice job on that. But, I suppose only Andy Reid, Doug Pederson, and the other coaches on the staff know exactly what he really does.
And Soren, when we talk about being a head coach in this league, a lot of it is presence. Of that 15 minutes you guys get with Doug, how does he come across? Does he come across like a guy who can command the room, so to speak?
I think he definitely comes across like Andy Reid, which Andy Reid now, I mean, like you can see the way I'd put it is you can see the influence that Andy Reid and how he carries himself has had on Doug Pederson. And when Andy Reid does that, that's one thing. That's a guy who's got a winning record as an NFL playoff coach. He's got division titles. So just the resume kind of does a lot of the talking for Andy Reid. I don't think Pederson's going to dominate the room immediately, but I get the sense that years 1 and 2 of Andy Reid didn't really dominate the room. Here was this red-headed fat guy standing out there that had really been elevated up incredibly quick, and I'm sure a lot of people had real questions about Andy Reid. And I think that'll be there. Doug Pederson's probably a more known commodity than Andy Reid was when he got the job, but I think that's something he'll certainly struggle with initially because he's not a John Gruden with a scowl. He's not going to trade barbs with the media like a Tom Coughlin or Bill Parcells. But, I don't know. I think everybody, all the great coaches we know about that are kind of demonstrative, probably grew into that role, and Doug Pederson's true personality will probably come out in year 2 or 3. Whether he has success or failure, it'll be drawn out one way or the other as he grows into the job, I would assume.
Yeah, we're talking about Doug Pederson and whether or not, he's ready for this job. Soren Petro down there in Kansas City, 8:10 a.m. And, right now, the reason many people feel that he is a top candidate, if not the top candidate, is because Andy was here, and it's almost because of what Chip did. It was like, all right, we miss you, Andy. Does it feel like that this is just a trip down memory lane here? Does Doug Pederson seem like he is ready to take over a football team right now, or is it legitimately because he was on Andy's staff? Would this be a familiarity hire?
I think there's a little bit of that. I think you certainly got to wonder that, and that was certainly our question from afar. Is like, okay, they tried, and I think you put it very well. The flavor of the month with Chip Kelly, they didn't like how that ended up, and so let's go back. Let's get the band back together, at least as much of it as we can. We'll try to recreate Andy Reid without having to bring Andy Reid in and pay a fraction of the price for Andy Reid. Although I don't think that's certainly not the MO of the Eagles that they shy away from the price tag. But that would be one of the results that's there, and that was one of the questions that I really had. But there is a precedent for a move like this working, and it was Bob Kraft going out and getting Bill Belichick back in. Kraft had liked Bill Belichick when he was there for a year in New England. They apparently grew close together when he came back onto Bill Parcells' staff with the Patriots after he got fired with the Browns, and he thought about hiring him, but just didn't think that Belichick had the presence, which is, kind of interesting based on the question you asked. I think everybody would ask based on how Doug Pederson carries himself. Like, he's not going to win the press conference. I mean, Belichick certainly wasn't going to win the press conference, so he didn't hire him then. He went with Pete Carroll, and then ultimately when he wanted to make a change, he went for the guy that I think he wanted all along, and that was Bill Belichick, and it wasn't popular, and he didn't win the press conference. And I think he went 5-11 his first year and was 2-4 in year 2 before they caught fire and won the Super Bowl. So, there is some similarities to that. If you had a guy you liked who was part of a system you liked that worked well with you, you had a chemistry with, and he understands how you work, I think there is some precedent there for going and getting your type of guy. And then I think the key is going to be able to put the right personnel people around. I mean, was certainly a big part of the equation here in Kansas City when Andy Reid was brought in. First time around, they got Scott Pioli because they felt like Carl Pederson had really lost his touch with personnel, so they wanted to get him in. They gave him total control because he had been with the Patriots, and they brought in a series of coaches, and Todd Haley and Romeo Crennel, that just didn't work for different reasons. Todd Haley because he went to war with Pioli, and Crennel because he was just kind of his lapdog. And so I think that's the other part, is you can bring in Pederson, personnel guy that works well with them, because that's where John Dorsey and Andy Reid, whoever really does have the most power. When Andy Reid's hired first, you got to wonder if they're actually two equals the way Clark Hunt has built them. But however it works, it's worked well, certainly to this point. And I think that'll be a big part of the equation. And that might be one of the things that's attractive in Doug Pederson, is that, having been here, and I'm sure Lori's, spoken to Andy Reid, and there's a feeling of, hey, well, this is why we're working here. We get along with the personnel side. We're on the same page. And if Doug Pederson can bring that, where Chip Kelly wanted to run the show and had his way of doing things, my way or the highway type of approach, I think that's always going to be a tough situation to work. So I think that might be part of what makes Doug Pederson attractive, is he brings a good chemistry of not being the GM, of being around Andy Reid when he's not the GM, and seeing how that works and maybe recreating that in Philadelphia.
So, Soren, let's take a look at the Chiefs' offense. You mentioned it's a collaborative effort. Obviously, Andy has the most input. Doug's involved. Brad Childress, passing coordinator. So a lot of cooks in the kitchen, not the most explosive offense, but it seems far more well-rounded this year now that they got Jeremy Maclin, have a threat outside the numbers. How has it come across in Kansas City? What do they think of that offense?
Well, and that's one of the things, look, I mean, no matter who gets hired, if Matt Castle's your quarterback, he's going to get fired. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, you have to get the quarterback position right to at least a minimum acceptable level. And I think for a couple of years, that was kind of the feeling here. Maybe even a couple of years and 6 games in, when the Chiefs are 1-5, it was below an acceptable level. The conversation here was how to get rid of Alex Smith, how to dump his contract, how to get another quarterback in, and then everything started to click, and that's without Jamal Charles. I mean, I think there's a real appreciation. It's the number 27 offense in the NFL yardage-wise. It's, I think, number 30 passing. It's in the top 6 or 7 running, and then I think point-wise, though, it's like 8 or 9. Now, part of that's because the defense has forced a lot of turnovers and given them short fields. That helps them score. It also hurts them as far as just piling up statistical yards to make that part look better. But, they've dealt with losing Jamal Charles. They dealt with bringing in Jeremy Maclin and trying to assimilate him into the offense. And I think that took a good 6, 7, 8 games for Alex Smith and Jeremy Maclin to get on the same page. I think he's done a nice job with nice pieces. He hasn't been given the greatest talent. You got a very good young tight end who turns the ball over and gets bad penalties in Travis Kelce. They finally got a wideout. I mean, they were working with absolute mucus at the wide receiver position the last couple of years. So they bring in Jeremy Maclin. Dwayne Bowe, you can see the disaster he's been in Cleveland. They actually got something out of him for a couple of years in Kansas City. But Jeremy Macklin's really helped that. And over the second half of the season, if you look at his numbers, the way they've really taken off, they finally clicked with Alex Smith and Maclin and getting him going. And I think the other thing is, everybody loves the passing game and throwing it around. That's the drive for show, putt for dough. Well, driving is the throwing the ball around. Everybody loves that part of it. But you got to be able to coordinate a run game. And this offensive line has been, every week and really every game, it's a fire drill. Tackles moving over to guards, rookie centers moving out, second-year guards moving over to center. They've been moving guys around all year. If you take a look at their 16 offensive line combinations, it'll blow your mind how they've had to handle that kind of stuff. Yet they've done it and then gone to a running back in Sharkhandrick West that nobody drafted, and a running back in Spencer Ware that was cut by the Seahawks coming out of training camp and basically rushed for 1,000 yards in the 10 games since Jamal Charles has been gone. I mean, somebody's doing something right when you're moving all the pieces around. There are no big money offensive linemen. There are a lot of young guys, except for obviously the number 1 overall pick in Eric Fisher, who was a disappointment really till about the last 8 games. You know, somebody's doing something right to mix all those different pieces and really what you call second shelf pieces and make it look like it has and be productive and score points. So, you know, I'd rather, look, I told people when Jack Del Rio got hired by the Raiders, that's bad news for the Chiefs, because if you can take David Garrard to the playoffs and win a playoff game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're doing something. You know, standing there and handing the football, inflated or deflated, to Tom Brady is one thing. Getting David Garrard to win a playoff game is another. And Alex Smith's better than David Garrard, but he's down the Garrard road. He's on that exit of the highway much more than he is the Tom Brady and Peyton Manning side. So while the numbers aren't going to blow anyone away, they've accomplished more here because the pieces aren't Hall of Fame pieces that they're working with.
He's the host of the program in Kansas City, 810, Soren Petro, with a look at Doug Pederson and the Kansas City Chiefs. And, of course, they'll play the Patriots this weekend. You can hear that game on 97.3. Soren, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.